Hello, I'm Anthony Grayling, and I'd like to welcome you to this Hay Festival, Imagine the World. My most recent book is called The Frontiers of Knowledge, and the motivation for writing it comes from the fact that very, very recently, there has been an enormous expansion of knowledge in most of the major areas of inquiry that humans are interested in. So, for example, just in the last few decades, because of the development of technology for scanning the brain, we've learned an enormous amount about which functions are performed by which parts of the brain. This is through functional magnetic resonance imaging of the brain. And so neuroscience has gone by leaps and bounds into new areas of discovery. That, as I say, is just the last few decades. In just the last century, a huge amount has been learned in physics and cosmology, fundamental physics, and our understanding of the universe and its history and its contents. This is remarkable. I mean, here I am speaking in 2021, and it's less than 100 years since quantum theory was given its, as it were, official welcome in physics at the 1927 Solvay conference. It was only in 1929 that Edwin Hubble saw that the universe is expanding. Just a few years earlier, he had noticed that the universe is not just the Milky Way galaxy that we are in, but that there are billions and billions of such galaxies. So there's an example how just in this last 100 years or so, our knowledge about the smallest and the largest things in nature has grown so immensely. And it is only about 150 years, really, since the second half of the 19th century, that our understanding of history has been transformed. Before that time, history stretched back to the archaic period of ancient Greece and to the period written about in the books of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, as Christians call them. So that was really taking history back to maybe 1,000 years BCE. But discoveries by archaeologists in the later part of the 19th century revealed the existence of great civilizations existing for thousands of years before that. The civilizations of Sumer and Akkad in Mesopotamia, and the civilizations of the Nile and of the Indus Valley. And even more than that, knowledge about the history of humankind itself. All the ancestors of Homo sapiens, the different subspecies of hominins that there had been for hundreds of thousands, indeed for millions of years beforehand. So again, just in the last century or so, our reach into the past has become even vaster. So if you think about history, you think about science, you think about psychology, there's been this massive explosion of knowledge. But one of the paradoxical things revealed to us by this great expansion of knowledge is just how much we don't know. You see, because it used to be thought that the more we learned, the less our ignorance became. The increase of knowledge was the diminution of ignorance. But what we've learned from this vast explosion of knowledge is that our ignorance is even vaster than we thought. Think about science, for example. All those achievements in physics and cosmology have told us that we have access to less than 5% of the mass density of the universe. Less than 5% of the universe is available to us to inspect it. More than 95%, over 95% of what exists in the universe, we can't see, we can't detect, other than very indirectly by the effects of dark matter on the gravitational behavior of galaxies, or dark energy pushing the universe faster and faster and faster apart. The expansion of the universe is speeding up. So dark matter and dark energy between them make for more than 95% of the universe, and we have no way of knowing what they are yet. So this massive increase of knowledge has been an even greater increase of ignorance. And in a way, that's exciting. And if you talk to physicists, you talk to neuroscientists, talk to historians, they all say, especially with the new technologies of inquiry that we have, with the more that we learn, the more we realize we can do to try to find out more. So it's as if the increase of ignorance has meant a much greater opportunity for inquiry. So it's not a bad thing, but it is an interesting thing that this has happened. The sort of aspect of this, which is of particular interest to me, and my day job is I'm a professor of philosophy, and one of the things that I'm really interested in philosophy is what's called epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, what knowledge is, how we get it, how we can best validate it. And what we have learned from this great increase in the volume of knowledge that we have is that we have to think differently about the nature of inquiry. You see, in the past, when it was believed that increasing knowledge was the same thing as diminishing ignorance, the real problem was, can we be certain? Can we find the truth? Are we going to get a complete theory of everything? Can we stop the skeptical challenges to our methods of inquiry so that we can reach those certainties and those truths? And those of you who were reading Descartes in bed last night will remember he says at the very beginning of his classic study, the Meditations, he says, what can we be certain of? I want to find out what is absolutely indubitable, absolutely certain. And that was the target, really, of inquiry into the nature of knowledge. Now, however, we realize that the more we find out, the more we realize the nature of our limitations, the kinds of barriers and challenges that we have to face. Let me give you an example. We human beings on this planet, in this solar system, occupy just a little point in the great scale of things, from the very tiniest to the very biggest, the largest that we can so far reach. Maybe what seems to us to be the tiniest and the biggest are only just the current limits of how far we can extend our inquiries. From the Planck quantities of length and mass, all the way up to the diameter of the universe and its age, 13.72 billion years since the Big Bang, at least of this universe, of this phase of the universe. But this may be just a result of our limits. This is how far we can see. We can't see further than that because we occupy this point on this great scale of things. It's as if we were looking at nature, looking at the universe through a little pinhole, tiny little pinhole. And we're trying to peer through it to see what lies on the other side. And through this pinhole, we push our instruments, our microscopes and telescopes, oscilloscopes, and we push our mathematics to use our maths to try to describe and to predict the phenomena out there. This has been hugely successful. Think of it. I mean, aeroplanes fly, computers work. We use our scientific knowledge in so many different applications in technology, and it's amazing what's happened in those applications as a result of knowing just less than 5% of the universe. So that's pretty surprising. It suggests that we have something right. We've got the tip of the tiger's tail as we peer through that pinhole. But still, we are limited by what we can do and how we can do it at this juncture. And as we peer through that pinhole, we use our instruments. That creates kinds of questions too. You know the saying, if your tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, does that suggest that what we can see, what we can find, is determined for us by what instruments are available to us? Are we therefore missing a great deal? Answer, obviously we are. If 95% of the universe is beyond our ability to access it. This relates to what's sometimes called the lamplight problem. If you lose your keys at night, the only place you can look is under the street lamp, because that's the only place you can see. It's too dark everywhere else. All our theories about things have the same relation to what they are theories of as a map does to a country. You may remember that short story by Borges, where he says that the ideal map is as big as the country of which it is a map, so that every detail can be there on the map. But obviously such a map would be no use to anybody. Therefore, a map is always small. The scale is always such that it bears a very impressionistic relationship to the country as a whole. And most of our theories about things are maps. Also, of course, we human beings have a great propensity to try to make sense of things by using metaphors. Back in the 16th, 17th century, people thought that the universe was like clockwork, or that even indeed a human body was like clockwork, a sort of mechanism, little cogs and pulleys working away. Later on, you may remember all the excitement when Yuri Gagarin went up into space and the first Sputnik and space exploration began back in the 1950s. Well, then people thought, well, maybe the gods were astronauts. That was a very entertaining and persuasive metaphor. Now we think the mind is a computational device, maybe even a computer. Another metaphor that we use to explain things. We're always using metaphors. Sometimes metaphors are very illuminating. Sometimes they're very misleading. Do our metaphors illuminate or mislead? Are we under the lamplight? Can we find anything in the darkness? Is our instrument a hammer? Are we looking through the pinhole? Finally, there is the great problem that we human beings are hungry for explanations. We want closure. We want to have an answer to the question, why, when, what? How does it work? What does it all mean? We're not very comfortable with open-endedness, although I have to say it is a remarkable and an admirable thing about inquiry, about scientists, about historians, about neuroscientists, about artists, that they are open, always open, open-ended in their activities, always looking for the new challenges. I can tell you a little anecdote. A friend of mine was one of the leading scientists on the compact muon solenoid experiment at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, which discovered the Higgs boson back in 2012. And I remember saying to him, gosh, it must have been so exhilarating on the day that you and all your colleagues felt that you were able to go public with the discovery of the Higgs field. And he said, yes, it was very exciting, but you know what? If we hadn't discovered it, it would have been even more exciting, because that would have meant that there was a huge amount of new physics to be done. And it's that attitude of wonder, of enjoyment, of pleasure, before all those vast terrains of ignorance, the preparedness to tackle those challenges to inquiry, and the resulting discoveries, the enhancement, the enrichment, really, of the human view of our universe, which is so wonderful. So I write about this in the book. I write about what those fields of inquiry are, what we know, how we came to know them, what we still don't know, what the challenges to inquiry, the new challenges, really, because we think about the nature of inquiry rather differently now as a result of this. And I end by arguing that it is terribly important that we should, all of us, try to become literate, at very least literate, in these great different fields of human endeavor. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a practicing physicist or a practicing historian to take an interest in the sort of headlines of what's happening in physics, or what's happening with historical discoveries, what's happening in our understanding of the brain and the mind. But to be literate, to be observant, to understand something about these things, be attentive to them, be able to follow the new advances as they happen, that, I think, is a very, very important thing for us to do. Not to become closed into silos, not to be ignorant of what's happening elsewhere. And one reason for this is, and I will end on this point, is that many of the advances that are happening, for example, in technology, the technology of artificial intelligence, let us say, there are many wonderful, positive, and good things to come out of that. But there are also some dangers. Autonomous weapons systems not controlled by human beings, for example, or the use of AI systems which might become autonomous in other ways, super intelligent artificial intelligence systems. How would we manage their functioning, and what impacts might they have on the nature of human life? If you think about robotics, what difference will be made to our lives by, for example, sex robots? What difference will they make to human relationships? The new technologies of neuroscience, the fact that with implants in the brain, things like mood, perception, memory can be affected. Very good if you want to try to regulate depression or to efface very painful memories, but couldn't it also be used for some forms of mind control? See, these are all questions that we need to be aware of. We need to know a bit about them. We need to be literate about these things so that we can be constructive contributors to the debates about what we do about them and whether we want them to happen at all. So that is the kind of bottom line of the book. It's a great survey of all these areas of knowledge, a discussion of them, and then a raising of questions that we should answer about them. If you have any questions for me after my talk, I'd be very, very happy to try to answer them. So please do send your questions to the Hay Festival.